All right, thank you for joining today. This is actually a recording or a re-recording of a presentation given to the Southern California chapter of the GCSAA. So this is about Civitas Turf Defense, and we're going to cover a number of different items, really focusing on California in the next 40 minutes, which is just a relatively short period of time. Uh, there's a lot about the product to understand, a lot about to know, but hopefully in the next 40 minutes we can kind of hit at least the highlights. So, we're going to cover a little bit about the active ingredient, why use it in a fungicide program, and then, the bulk of the talk is really going to focus on water, and we're going to talk about some water concepts and share some research that we have done on water and water reduction. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with putting it all together and then, open questions. And although this is not a live event, I will discuss some of the questions, the common questions that we typically get when we're doing a webinar. So first off, let's touch on the active ingredient a little bit. What makes this thing work? What makes it go? So on the left here, we have the label. And this is a snapshot just from the very front of the label. And a few things on here I want to draw your attention to. One is if you are in the state of California and applying in the state of California, be sure that you're using the Civitas Turf Defense Pre-Mixed California. We do have a product called Civitas Turf Defense Pre-Mix that is registered in 49 of our states, but of course, California, we have a product specifically for that, registered in that state. So if you're applying within California, just be sure that you're putting the right product out. Second off is, kind of the highlights of it, right? And it's right on the front of the label, but, plant protection product and fungicide for use on golf courses, sports, and athletic fields. It can help tolerate turf with limited water conditions and support a healthy, more durable playing surface. So really a few things from there. It's a registered fungicide. It's registered for limited water conditions and providing more durable playing surface. Um, the thing to know is that, it is only for sports turf. So it is labeled for golf courses, sports, and athletic fields. Technically, does that mean the lawns up around the clubhouse? Probably not. I wouldn't interpret the label that way. But like I said, that is up to the determination of the EPA and state registrations to make those determinations, but that's not how I interpret it. So just be aware that it's really specifically for the playing surfaces of your property. So then the other thing you notice here is the active ingredient. Well, what's the active ingredient? The active ingredient is mineral oil, which makes 88.8% of the product by weight. So, mineral oil, people have used mineral oils for many years in agriculture, over 100 years in agriculture. And that's one of the things here that I want to point out is that, over those 100 years, there have been a lot of different types of mineral oils with a lot of different names. These are all very common names used to describe or have been described what we think of as mineral oils. So a very broad general sense. So, I think that creates some misunderstanding because I would say very much so that the, mineral oils that were made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s are not of the quality that we're making today with the improved processes that we're using. So that process that we're really looking to make and really makes up the bulk of the active ingredient is we're trying to produce these linear alkanes and branched alkanes. So that really is the bulk of the product that is in the Civitas as mineral oil. And these branched alkanes and linear alkanes are simply carbon chains. So each one of these connections here is a carbon molecule. So if you look at our product, we have everything from a C17 to C32. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we can have a linear alkane that's a C17, that's be relatively short, and we could have one out to a C32 that's relatively long, and everything in between. And we could have that in the alkane form, and we could have that in the branched alkane form as well. So that really kind of is well, I want to say kind of that is why it's labeled as a mineral oil, because it's not a single molecule. You kind of get the sense it's a blend of molecules that are in there. So that's why it gets the name mineral oil. But really, what I want you to think of these products or Civitas as is a linear alkane. And alkanes are also in chemistry referred to isoparaffins, especially those branched alkanes are called isoparaffins. And if you know the terminology paraffin, you think paraffin wax. paraffin, type materials like that. So that's really kind of, in a sense, that's really what it's coming down to, is that the alkanes that we put into Civitas can be thought of as almost a liquid wax. When we look at the cuticle of a plant, one thing that I think is really interesting, this microscope slide on the upper left has you can see these kind of needles projecting out from the cuticle surface, and I think I just kind of put that in there because I think a lot of us think that cuticles are flat, smooth surface, but really they have these needles or these epicuticular wax crystals that project up out of the surface, and they actually grow up out of the surface. So that's actually part of the cuticle. And then, of course, you have the epicuticular wax film and the intracuticular wax as well. These all comprise the cuticle. So the cuticle really is functioning as just like our skin, to protect the plant cells that are inside from the weather, from sun, from cold, from the environment, right? And keep all of the water and nutrients and everything that we need for cell growth inside of that area. So that's really what the cuticle main purpose is. So when we look at the chemistry of the cuticle, we see a lot of different compounds in the cuticle: fatty acids, aldehydes, primary alcohols, secondary alcohols, alkanes, ketones, and wax esters. And if you look at the generic structure of all these compounds, they're basically carbon chains of varying lengths and varying structures. Um, the interesting thing is that the average carbon chain length of these materials is a C21. So again, the bulk of that chemical makeup are the alkanes. And if you remember, that is what Civitas is comprised of as well. So, really, when you think of mineral oils, I want you to think about these carbon chains of varying lengths. Like I said, the plant is a C21 on average, and Civitas in particular ranges from a C17 to C32. So you can kind of see that C21 really falls in the middle. So in a sense, like I said, you're really putting a liquid wax onto a solid wax of the cuticle, and that's really kind of that interrelationship, and why we can put Civitas on the plant. In addition to everything that we do as a manufacturing facility to get that quality material coming out. So shifting gears a bit, I mean, why use it in a fungicide program? And I think, again, today's focus really is talking about it as a drought program, but I think I have to give a nod to the fungicide because that's really what we came to market with. It was marketed when it first came out in 2009 as a registered fungicide, and that's really what we understood the most about the product at the time. And then really the drought came later when we started hearing from customers and started doing some of this research to really investigate it. So, anthracnose is really what I would say, one of the diseases that Civitas can really do the best on the label. So we are looking, this is just one small snippet. We have lots of anthracnose studies, but this is just one example I thought was kind of good to kind of get an understanding of the product. With Adam Van Dyke in the Salt Lake City, Utah area, 2019. And really a pretty simple study. So Civitas plus ammonium sulfate, Civitas plus fungicides, and then the same ammonium sulfate program and the same fungicide program, just without the Civitas. So, really looking at what does Civitas bring to the table when you add it to a tank mix. And that's often how we recommend it in a fungicide program. We have plenty of people that use Civitas as a cornerstone of their fungicide program for an organic golf course, where maybe they have high regulations or something where they cannot use other synthetic chemicals. So they have to use Civitas, and they use it very successfully there. Little bit different way to use it under those situations. I think you have to tighten up the intervals in particular is probably the biggest difference. But nonetheless, very effective. But really, I would say majority of the time we're recommending it to be used in an IPM program with other fungicides, other insecticides, plant growth regulators, everything else that you do to maintain your golf course. We usually recommend it in conjunction with that. And we'll see why a little bit later on. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is really a visual on why we do that. And in particular, here's the fungicide program. So this is like a systemic fungicide program, applications made every couple weeks. Simply just adding Civitas into that tank mix And really what we see, this is the area under disease progress curve for the whole year totaled. And what we see is really a 50% more control or better control just by adding Civitas into that program. But I think the biggest difference is the visual difference. And this is a picture of that same study, same year. I want to say this picture was taken in mid to late August. But here's that fungicide program, and here's that fungicide program with Civitas. So obviously, a lot greener, and that's really what we're in the business to do. We want green turf. And one thing that comes up very quickly is, people go, well, Civitas has a pigment in it. Of course, it's greener because you're dyeing it, you're staining it, you're painting over that. And we're going to look at more slides to come, but that green that you see on the right is not just from the pigment. And this picture was taken, I want to say at least a week after the last application. And to me, that pigment really, the purpose of that pigment is for that first, 2 or 3 days, usually a mowing or two, and then that pigment's done its job and it's gone. So this color is coming from somewhere else, and we'll look at that a little bit closer. But you see here the ammonium sulfate program. He was looking at, hey, could I just do it with fertility in anthracnose in Utah? And you can see that it did very well under those circumstances. So let's talk about water. I think with the current conditions in the West and even the upper Midwest has been pretty dry. And I think really all parts of the country can experience water deficit at some point through the year. You can pretty much rely on the fact that there may not be water for at least a month or more, even east of the Mississippi. So currently, what are the tools that we have at our disposal to manage drought? Well, irrigation. Hey, that makes complete sense. If I'm not getting rain out of the sky, I'm going to apply it myself. So irrigation, of course, is the first line of defense. And then you have aerification, really trying to keep the soils percolating, and so that when you do get that irrigation or rain event, you're making sure that you're getting as much into the soil bank as you possibly can. And kind of the same idea with wetting agents, at least as far as spreading and treating the soil to make sure that that water distributes evenly through the soil. But I think the new one are these plant defense activators, and I definitely see this as another tool in the toolbox to manage drought. And I think that's the thing is when you look at all three of these things, they're all really addressing soil, right? Getting better water distribution in the soil, getting more moisture into the soil. But really what these plant defense activators are, they're helping the plant conserve water. So we'll look at that a little bit more. But first, I want to talk about this graph from Texas A&M. I think is really good kind of concept to have when you're thinking about drought and managing turf under drought. So this blue line indicates plant health. So of course, the higher the line, the more plant health you have. The lower the line, you have, in this extreme case, dead turf. So turf managers, as we are turf managers, we're trying to maintain turf in this optimum window, right? We don't want it too dry because we know that turf health will decline, and we don't want it too wet because we know that turf health will decline. So we're trying to operate within this window, confined window, to make sure that we maintain optimum plant health. When we add in plant defense activators, this is how I like to best think of it, is that what it does is it shifts that plant health continuum. So now this blue line was the original line, but now with a plant defense activator, you have this black line. And generally speaking, what it allows you to do is maintain more or healthier plants in moderately dry conditions than you would without. So what's it doing? It's opening up that optimum window for you. So that can mean a lot of things. For a tournament golf course, they want to operate in that moderately dry area to have firm, dry conditions. But you want to keep turf looking good at the same time. So in a sense, you can do that with this material, and there's a lot of our customers that actually use it for that purpose. For your more general golf courses or more general times a year, to me, what it does is it opens up that optimum window. So now you have more room for error, right? Maybe you maintain at that optimum area, your irrigation system goes down for a day or two, you buy a little bit of time. Maybe it translates to hand watering for other people. It can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But basically, what it does is it opens up that optimum watering window for you. So let's look at some of the research or some of the field proof at least. This is an example, or this is a test that we did. This is actually one of the first times that really my eyes were open to the possibilities of Civitas and use for drought. Again, this is in Salt Lake City, so it can get, we know it can get pretty dry and warm there. And we were running a customer field study, and we were simply treating one fairway, and then adjacent to it had a fairway that we left untreated. They were both under fairly similar conditions, similar, type of topography, everything. So we tried to keep that as close as we could. But the thing is, on the treated fairway, at the same time, we were reducing the water by 10% every week, maybe 2 weeks. We were watering the overall, the global adjust on that fairway. So basically, we want to see like how low could we water and still have our turf maintained and look in good condition. And pretty simple here. We took a TDR. We did some average volumetric water content is really what I'd look at here. We took maybe a dozen readings on the treated fairway and a dozen readings on the untreated fairway, and of course try to do it in somewhat similar manner. But regardless, you can see here 34.3% on the untreated check and 27.1% on the treated fairway. And if you look at the photographs visually, you can see that this untreated fairway actually had a higher volumetric water content, but to me looks like it's under more drought stress than the treated fairway, which had lower volumetric water content and is under less drought stress. So, and you could really see that over the whole entire area. So that was kind of the first, I'd say, aha moment where we say, okay, now we have some numbers. We're kind of looking at this. Let's take it to the university and see if we can replicate this. So that's exactly what we've been doing the past number of years here. So the first study was with Adam Van Dyke again, the same one that did the anthracnose study, looking at Kentucky bluegrass, so higher heights of cut, making applications every 2 weeks, June through October. And this is a visual of that study. What we did also, in addition to the treatments in the drought, we did run a golf cart over it to simulate some wear stress as well, to get a kind of an idea of how it would perform. So, you can see here, this is a photograph taken again late August. Definitely have some drought stress on the untreated areas and definitely some improvement in the treated areas. And when we look at it closer, here's the Civitas treated on the left, here's the untreated on the right, and then where this pen is the cart wear area, the tire wear area, to simulate that traffic. And one of the things I think really is you look at this treated area on the left, boy, it's a lot greener, right? Visually you just pick up there's a lot less yellowing and a lot less turf senescing. So one of the first things that turf does when it's under stress, and particularly under drought stress, is it sloughs off those older leaves, and those older leaves take up energy, so basically, and water, so that plant is getting rid of it to help conserve as much as it possibly can and to support the growth of those newer leaves that are the stronger leaves, right? So senescing really it's a result of drought, but it's also an indication of plant stress. So when I look at this, why is this more brown and this more green? Well, to me, it's really about the number of those senescing leaves that are occurring. You see a lot less here. And then it's kind of like, the rich get richer in this scenario because now you have more green leaf tissue, more chlorophyll-filled leaf tissue. Leaves are solar panels. They make energy for the plant. Hey, the more solar panels I have, the more energy I'm going to make. So again, this to me is an example and really a photograph of what the definition of plant health. I know that term gets used a lot nowadays, but if I have more green chlorophyll-filled solar panels making energy for the plant, that to me is plant health. And then you look at the wear area, you kind of see the same trend. Obviously, where there's wear, there's more senescing leaves, even in the treated area. But definitely Adam made some comments in his report that he did see, and you can kind of pick up in this picture as well, some thicker turf where that wear was occurring. So really in this picture, you capture a lot of different ideas of how the product is best used. A little brief comment on traffic. One of the things that I have come to realize the past few years is, we have that traffic statement and we have that water statement on our label. And really, I got to tell you, I think both are really interrelated pretty tightly. If you think about trafficked areas on your golf course, um, you're going to get less infiltration because they're more compacted. So that water that does occur, be it through irrigation or rain, is going to run off and not go in your soil where you need it. The other thing is you reduce that pore space, so you have reduced available water capacity for the plant. So the plant can't get as much water from the soil as it would in uncompacted state. So, really explains to me a lot of our customers over the years love the product on green surrounds, cart path ends, high wear areas, and have been using it that way for many, many years. And I think that a lot of it has the benefit for the durability of the turf for traffic, but I think even maybe more so on the drought of those trafficked areas that are actually under drought stress to some degree. So here's a study on Bermuda grass from Mark Mahady. This study was done 2020 at Palm Springs, California. And pretty simple study. This is kind of an entry into, a bunch of other treatments being made. But this light blue line is Civitas plus a wetting agent. We wanted to put a wetting agent in because we know that Civitas does not work on the soil. So we wanted to make sure that we had a wetting agent in there to address any potential soil conditions, localized dry spot, that type of thing. But I really see that as Civitas, you're treating the plant in drought stress conditions, and you still utilize wetting agents to treat the soil under drought stress conditions. One of the interesting things is, we can see that it clearly outperformed a lot of these other treatments. But if you notice, the turf grass quality in June started the year at 4. Not very good turf quality starting the year. And the study was done with 40% ET replacement through the entire year. And one of the interesting things to me is even though 40% to me is considered probably too little water under most circumstances, that turf quality still improved month over month over month, and by the end of the year was up into the seven. So I think from a practical standpoint, again, this is research, but from a practical standpoint, I'd want to water early on the season, get that Bermuda grass really going, get that turf quality up to closer to 6 or above. Start the year there, and then integrate your Civitas. Go to that low watering regime, and then maintain that turf quality, or even with this you can even see it may even improve even so. So it really I think this study was one of those studies that 40% AT is very little water. It's almost a worst case scenario. So when we look at University of California, 2019, we did some Bermuda grass studies there as well. Here we're looking at green coverage percentage. So that's that how much senescing material do I have versus the green live material. Three different watering regimes: 45% ET, 55% ET, 65% ET. What I did is I highlighted the readings that were statistically different from the untreated control. So you can kind of see that trend very quickly, that the less you water, the more benefit you get, which I think really makes sense, over the untreated control. The more that untreated control is stressed out, the more benefit you're going to get from putting certain products out. And that definitely demonstrates a very clear linear there that, 45% versus 65%, that, there's still a benefit at that 65%, but you're going to get more of a benefit more of the time of year, even at those low watering regimes, which, under drought conditions, if you're forced into them, especially, at least you know that you're getting some benefit by putting the product out as far as that green coverage goes. Um, Also looking at different treatments. So treatment 1 is the untreated control. Treatments 2 and 4 are looking at 14-day intervals, and treatment 3 is the 21-day interval. What we want to explore is, how much does the interval difference make? How much does the rate difference make? I think what this clearly demonstrates is that treatment 3, that 21-day interval, we don't see that as much statistical difference. with that. So really, that's where our recommendation really focuses on 14-day interval for drought to get the maximum benefit. Um, is really the best way to go. You will get a benefit. I mean, there are statistical differences in these other readings in particular, the 55 and 65. But you're going to get the most benefit doing the 14-day window. And then, of course, looking at rates. So a high rate, or I shouldn't say a high rate, 8.5 ounces are a low label rate. 4.5 ounces is below our label rate. But again, just kind of exploring or researching that, where's that difference and how important is rate to results. And what you can clearly see is that the rate is the higher the rate, the more benefit you're going to get. We actually have people using, it at, 10, 12 ounces, even higher to get even more benefit. It's really up to the user. There's that cost, uh, return benefits that you got to look at on an individual basis. But there's no doubt tighter window, higher rate, better results. Anything back from that, you're going to get less results. But regardless, you're going to get results. Even to the extreme here. So, you can definitely see why you're putting this material out. So this is 2020, looking at turf quality at University of California, Riverside again. Note here, 55% ET, 65% and 75% ET. So these are actually a little higher watering. You remember that 2019, we went down to 45%. So I think in this case, we didn't really, we did see a difference for sure. We would have saw more difference if we went down the 55 or the 45% rather. But I do think what this demonstrates is that Civitas, 8.5 ounces every 2 weeks at a 55% watering ET, we maintained turf quality of 6 or above the whole season. So that's really kind of where I think if I were a turf manager, I would feel pretty comfortable with, that 50 to 60% ET replacement with that 8.5 and 14-day interval. You're going to have acceptable turf quality on Bermuda grass throughout the entire year. So, that's we drop down in rate. We have some periods where we drop below that 6. So really why, again, that 8.5 is really our recommendation um, moving forward. So then this is really just kind of a summary of those recommendations and best practices. So the rate, 8.5 ounces, like I said, you can go up or down depending on your personal needs. And that's the great thing about Civitas is we find you could talk to 100 different people. They're going to use it 100 different ways. But I think that's the beauty of the product is you're able to do just that. So 8.5 ounces, 14-day interval is exactly where I'd start. Typically, because it's a plant activator, you want to start before the stress occurs. I have seen, in that situation, like with the Mahadi study, even at that low turf quality, we were able to get out of it. But ideally, you want to start those programs where the turf is where you want it to be. You know that drought stress is coming in 2 to 4 weeks. Start getting it into the system, start activating that plant, getting it moving so that you can maintain that turf quality best throughout the year. And then end the program. So when do I stop the program? What we have found, and we've looked at other studies where we stop the program halfway through the summer, partway through the summer. What we found is that you want to continue to make those applications throughout the entire period of drought. Again, kind of take that thought process of a phosphite program, where you get in early and you make repeated applications. It's kind of the same idea. And then the big thing to watch out, where I've seen people kind of stumble is only apply to hydrated plants. When we're talking drought, we're talking about plants that might be under wilt stress. A best management practice for a lot of our customers is apply after a heavy irrigation cycle. Maybe they apply Sunday night late and they make applications of the product on Monday morning or apply water late Sunday. And then, the other is, of course, a rain event, and then they go out and spray the next day. That really would be my advice. What happens is when the plant's under wilt stress, those plants, suck everything into the plants. We don't want the material in the plant. We want it on the outside. So make sure those plants are hydrated. I'd say the same thing for wetting agents, fertilizers, anything else that you're putting out. I think that's a pretty good best management practice regardless. So kind of summarizing or putting it all together, I think that's the great thing about Civitas, and we really didn't even touch on it here. We only talked about a couple of the benefits, but it does have multiple benefits. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's proven to work. It is an EPA registered fungicide. It's EPA registered for limited water conditions and a more durable playing surface. So, you know, we had to produce materials to prove the EPA that it does work in that fashion. So, you know, you're getting what you pay for it there is really the essential thing to understand. Environmentally responsible. You know, it's really been a cornerstone not only of the product, but our company as well. But it's OMRI listed, so it's listed by the Organic Management Resource Institute in both U.S. and Canada. The other thing is there's no known resistance issues. So, you know, using it as a fungicide, you know, you can use it repeatedly, time over time, and we have no documented resistance for mineral oils. And like I said, they've been used for over 100 years. So, you know, it's something where, you know, in an IPM program, it can really make a lot of sense for that cornerstone in conjunction with other systemic type products. It allows for fertility and chemical input reduction. So we've seen, you know, it can help other products work better, other fungicides work better in particular. So, you know, some people choose to use less of it or lower their rates. And then the other thing is fertility. We've noticed and over the years have been looking at fertility reductions because now you have better turf quality. You don't need to put as much fertilizer into the system. So we're actually coming out with some studies looking at that specifically. And then, of course, reduce water consumption. I mean, you guys are living that, you know, water is a huge concern for the world. And, you know, the less of it we need to use, I think the better off we're going to be. And then carbon-based, you know, I think that's one of the things you see a lot of carbon-based products out there being marketed. I don't think that's really why people are buying our product by any means, but certainly, like we looked at that molecule, the bulk of it, you know, 80% of the product is actual carbon molecules, and a big reason, obviously, why it's OMRI listed because it's a carbon-based product. Um, so you kind of get the sense here. You're really getting multiple products in one. It addresses biotic and abiotic issues. It enhances the performance of fungicides, insecticides, herbicides. So really, in a very basic sense, it's an adjuvant. It's a spreader sticker. You can see it when you spray it. You actually will see it on the leaf blade, how it kind of spreads and sticks that material. And we think a lot of the benefit when you tank mix with fungicides and other products is that you get that increased efficacy and you get increased longevity of those other products. A lot of the reason because that physical spreader sticker type benefit that you're getting. Um, and then, you know, natural looking pigment. So uh, the you know a lot of people are out buying pigments, putting in their spray tanks. Personally, I think Civitas has one of the best looking pigments out there. You know, it's a nice natural green looking pigment. It's very nice pigment from that standpoint. Not at all what I think the product is about, but like I say, if you're buying a pigment, you don't necessarily need to put it in with Civitas because you already have it. And then lastly, and I think really what it all boils down to, healthier turf. We want better quality turf, better color turf all season long. And we're talking here about anthracnose and drought, which is all summer, but you know, Civitas for a long time and continue to be microdochium snow mold applications, winter applications are really a huge benefit to the product. But long story short, any time of the year, it makes the turf grass quality better. And then lastly is it activates the plant health or the plant's natural defenses. So, you know, if you're familiar with phosphites and BTH, you know, they're plant activators and they activate a plant defense mechanism. And they all operate on the SAR or systemic acquired resistance branch. And what's unique about Civitas, it's a plant defense activator. It's an ISR, induced systemic resistance. It's a different branch of that same plant defense mechanism. There's probably a few more that we don't know about yet, but you know, at least these are two. So kind of what, you know, what we feel is that, you know, it's always best to have two branches. And, you know, one of the things that we often recommend is that Civitas be tank mixed with phosphite fertilizers for that reason. We actually see kind of a synergism there with the two products. And a lot of that work was done by Thomas Young up in University of Guelph, looking at those plant defense mechanisms in detail. So really, this is a picture of what it's all about to me. This is a baseball field. We're running a study. The irrigation system went down. So really, this is turf that ended up being under drought stress. And, why is this treated better looking than this? It's not green pigment, it's lack of senescing leaves. And, whether it's the senescing leaves are occurring because the plant's not, or plant is under stress, and that's why it's occurring. But regardless, this is really what I'm looking for. And I would really suggest that if you're using it on your golf course or testing on your golf course, to do just this. Take a plug from a treated area versus untreated. Hold them side by side. Uh, the higher the stress, the more drought stress is under, the easier it is to see. The higher cut turf, it's easier to see. But even under low to moderate stress, you can start picking this out. And that's definitely what I would encourage you to look at, because I think that's really what the product's all about at the end of the day. So interested in learning more, we do have a Twitter handle at IntelliGrowTurf. I would suggest, sometimes I will post videos, podcasts, things like that. You can go back and look at, the ones we've done in the past as well. So it's kind of like a sense of a catalog of information there. Of course, our website, civitasturf.com, and then my email. Email me with any questions that you may have. And on my email signature, I have this Dropbox link. It's really, again, a library of information, probably too much information at this point, but basically what I try to do is, gather all the information that we create, gather all the information we find on the internet, put them in one place so that people don't have to search so much for things. But like I said, that catalog's getting really big now. So, but there's videos, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of things. A lot of the research studies we'll put right on there. So typically this is where we'd ask questions. Again, my contact information if you ever have any questions. But I would say that some of the biggest questions we get are really about tank mixing. What can I tank mix with? And if you refer to the label, you'll see it say do not mix with PCMB, and I would say do not mix with PCMB. The other thing is use caution with chlorothalonil and use caution with DMIs. Quite honestly, I would say the DMI to me, that is really the biggest concern, or that is to me where I've seen the biggest hiccups in the past, is that, when I talk about that amplification effect, where we can get, and I'll use this as an example, resistance. If somebody has resistance, DMI resistance on their golf course, and they say to me, you know what, I get maybe 7 days control with my DMI. I put Civitas in the tank, and now I'm back up to 14 days control. So that's great, right? So effectively, you're raising that rate of material, and that's exactly what we find is you're basically doubling the rate of those DMIs when you put them out. So that is a great thing, and I totally recommend putting Civitas with DMIs at the appropriate time of year. I think the thing to do is that you have to keep in mind and understand is that if it's summer and you're putting out a 1 ounce rate of a DMI, and now you put Civitas in with it, now you're getting 2 ounces. So just keep that in mind. So that can work for you in good, and it can work for you in bad. But just keep that very much in mind that when you're amplifying the DMI rate. The other thing is chlorothalonil. So chlorothalonil is in our label. I have to be honest, over the years, I haven't had too many comments or suggestions about chlorothalonil or observations in a negative way. I think a lot of it's related to when the product first came out, the label rates of chlorothalonil were considerably higher than they are today. And our recommendation at that time was to stay at low to medium conservative kind of rates with chlorothalonil. I think now that those levels have come down over the years, what we think of today as a high label rate was, maybe a mid label rate of the past. But regardless, I would recommend that, you test in an area before you do so. But, stay with the low label rate when you make that tank mix, just to be extra safe. The other thing is tank mixing with pigments. Hey, you have a pigment, can I put another pigment in? I say that's up to the eye of the beholder. How green or how pigmented do you want it to look? I would say that the only watch out for that would be really high shade areas. And when I say that, it's more like building shades, like, when you get into a soccer field, a soccer stadium, something like that, where you have hard shade, and you need every bit of sunlight that you can get. These pigments, They do block some UV light rays. They can protect from UV light rays, but in situations where you have very minimal sunlight availability, it may be detrimental. But those are maybe 1% of the cases, even less, very extreme cases. But that would be something that you probably want to keep in mind when you're mixing with pigments. And just to give you an idea, when you put Civitas out at the 8.5 ounce rate, 5% of that leaf blade is covered with pigment. So, 95% of that leaf blade isn't. And then lastly, I would say the other plant defense activators, like we said, there's two branches, and I think early on, can I overstimulate the plant by putting too many plant defense activators in there? And like I said, a very common recommendation for us is to put those phosphate fertilizers in with them. We find they work very well together. I don't really have any concerns about mixing those plant defense activators. So those are really the common questions that we get. Again, my email is up there. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Feel free to reach out. But I do appreciate your time and hope to see you sometime soon. Thank you. Bye.